She's brilliant at work. Harvard MBA, flawless presentations, strategic recommendations that save companies millions. But when she suggests the team celebrate at an expensive restaurant she expects the company to fund, everyone exchanges glances. When she mentions that men should always pay because that's what gentlemen do, eyebrows raise. When she's genuinely confused why her last three relationships ended despite being obviously perfect, the cognitive dissonance becomes undeniable. You've seen this woman everywhere. The stunning colleague who analyzes complex data but can't understand why men won't commit. The gorgeous friend with a psychology PhD who believes her looks exempt her from developing relationship skills. Today, I'm going to shatter every assumption you have about beauty, intelligence, and how attractiveness warps reality. Because what I'm about to reveal will explain the most confusing phenomenon in modern dating, why the most beautiful women often make the most catastrophically stupid decisions about love, relationships, and basic human nature. Here's the simple explanation that unlocks everything. Beautiful women are relationship stupid because no one has ever told them the truth about anything that matters. Not occasionally, not sometimes, never. For 20, 30, even 40 years of life, they've existed in a reality where truth went extinct the moment they became attractive. Think about the economics of this extinction. When a woman possesses something that men desperately want, her beauty, her attention, her body, those men will say absolutely anything they believe will increase their chances of getting it. Truth becomes not just irrelevant, but actively counterproductive. Strategic communication becomes the only currency that spends. This isn't some men lying to some women. Sometimes this is a systematic extinction of truth that begins the moment she develops curves and continues until the day she dies. Every conversation becomes contaminated by agenda. Every piece of feedback gets filtered through desire. Every opinion gets modified by hope. The beautiful woman becomes the victim of the greatest fraud ever perpetrated, an entire civilization conspiring to convince her that the world works in ways that it absolutely does not. She's been living in a parallel universe where cause and effect operate according to completely different rules than the reality everyone else inhabits. But here's what makes this tragedy complete. She has no idea any of this is happening. The lies are so consistent, so universal, so seemingly genuine that she accepts them as objective truth. She builds her entire worldview, her relationship strategies, her understanding of men and human nature on a foundation of systematic deception designed to serve other people's sexual interests rather than help her navigate reality. She becomes what I call a master of self-destruction, someone who systematically creates the opposite of what she wants because she's operating with completely false information about how relationships actually work. Let me take you back to the moment this disaster begins. She's 13, maybe 14 years old. Yesterday she was invisible, just another awkward teenager trying to figure out math homework and social hierarchies. Then puberty hits like a nuclear explosion, and everything changes overnight. Suddenly, men of all ages are staring at her. Not just boys her age, grown men, teachers, fathers of her friends, strangers on the street. She's acquired massive power that she doesn't understand, can't control, and definitely isn't emotionally equipped to handle. It's terrifying, scary, exciting, and confusing all at the same time. Here's the crucial detail everyone misses. She's still emotionally and psychologically a child, but she's been handed adult-level power over adult men's behavior. Her actual age says 14, but her emotional maturity is still developing like any other teenagers, except now she's wielding influence that would challenge a fully mature woman. From that moment forward, she will never hear the truth from men again. Every interaction becomes a negotiation where honesty is the losing strategy and strategic agreement is the winning play. The moment she becomes beautiful is the moment truth dies in her world. The men around her aren't evil, they're rational. They quickly discover that telling her what she wants to hear gets them positive responses, attention, maybe even physical rewards. Telling her what she needs to hear gets them eliminated from her social circle. The incentive structure is crystal clear, and rational actors respond accordingly. Let me explain the brutal mathematics that creates this disaster. Being honest with beautiful women doesn't get you sex. Being dishonest often does. This creates what I call the honesty-sex contradiction, a situation where the very thing she needs most, honest feedback, is the very thing men are least incentivized to provide. Think of it like a classroom where the teacher asks open-ended questions but attacks any student who doesn't give the answer. She already decided she wanted to hear. What do you think about my new approach? Seems like a request for honest opinion, but it's actually a test with only one acceptable response. The student who gives the wrong honest answer gets destroyed. The student who gives the right strategic answer gets praised. Beautiful women create exactly this dynamic in every relationship. They ask for feedback, but respond negatively to feedback that challenges their assumptions. They claim to value authenticity, but reward validation instead. They say they want genuine opinions, but punish anyone who provides them. The mathematical probability that any honest answer will accidentally align with what she wants to hear is basically zero, maybe 1 in 20 on the best possible day. The probability that strategic agreement will produce positive outcomes approaches complete certainty. Men aren't stupid. They optimize for results rather than principles. But here's where the contradiction becomes catastrophic. While these lies protect men from short-term rejection, they create long-term disasters for the women receiving them. She makes relationship decisions based on false information, gets terrible results, and receives more lies to explain why the false information didn't work. The cycle perpetuates until her understanding of basic human dynamics becomes completely divorced from reality. Women only reward truth that matches what they already wanted to hear. All other truth, no matter how accurate or helpful, gets punished. This creates a selection pressure where only strategic lies survive in her information ecosystem. Only a tiny fraction of men will consistently tell beautiful women the truth, and they fall into very specific categories that reveal exactly why. Honesty is so extinct in these dynamics. First, men with extraordinary dedication to honesty. Those unusual individuals who put principles ahead of personal gain. These men will tell the truth, regardless of consequences, because their self-respect depends on integrity rather than outcomes. They represent maybe 2% of the male population, and they often pay severe social costs for their commitment to reality. Second, men on the autism spectrum for whom social consequences matter less than accuracy. They struggle to understand why they should modify truth to manage someone else's emotions, so they deliver unfiltered feedback because strategic dishonesty literally doesn't compute in their neural wiring. The concept of lying to avoid hurt feelings makes no sense to them. Third, family men, fathers and brothers who aren't trying to sleep with her and have genuine long-term investment in her welfare rather than short-term access to her body. These men can absorb the emotional consequences of her displeasure because their relationship doesn't depend on maintaining her sexual approval. Notice what all these categories have in common. They're either immune to her beauty's power or have compelling reasons to prioritize her long-term success over their short-term comfort. Everyone else, the overwhelming majority of men she encounters, has powerful incentives to lie rather than tell the truth. The result is that she lives in an information desert where truth is rarer than water in the Sahara, and she's dying of deception poisoning without even knowing she's thirsty. Imagine working for a boss with a fragile ego who becomes hostile when challenged, attacks employees who disagree with her ideas, and has the power to fire anyone who threatens her self-image. This boss asks for your honest opinion about her terrible strategies, but you know from watching other employees that honesty leads to career suicide. Would you tell this boss when her ideas are catastrophic? Would you point out her mistakes? Would you offer constructive criticism that could improve outcomes but might trigger her wrath? Or would you smile, nod, and say, "Boss, that's a brilliant strategy"? While quietly doing damage control behind the scenes, most rational employees would choose survival over honesty. They'd praise bad ideas publicly while working to minimize their damage privately. They'd agree with flawed logic while finding ways to work around it later. They'd become strategic yes people because the risk-reward calculation makes honesty economically suicidal. Beautiful women often create identical dynamics in their relationships. Men quickly learn that disagreeing leads to emotional explosions. Challenging her leads to accusations of being unsupportive, and providing honest feedback leads to relationship termination. Meanwhile, agreement leads to continued access. Validation leads to positive responses, and strategic affirmation might lead to sexual rewards. The rational male response becomes, say whatever I have to say to keep my position and avoid getting fired, rather than help her understand reality, even if it cost me everything. They're not trying to deceive her maliciously. They're trying to survive in a system where truth is punished and lies are rewarded. This creates what economists call moral hazard, a situation where the person with power is insulated from the consequences of their decisions, while others bear the cost of accommodating their delusions. Here's why this system becomes permanently self-destructive rather than self-correcting. Beautiful women learn to expect validation, agreement, and strategic affirmation from every interaction with men. When someone occasionally tells them the truth, it doesn't feel like valuable information. It feels like a personal attack that must be repelled. The punishment for truth is swift and severe. Women get upset, offended, defensive, and often terminate relationships with men who provide honest feedback. The truth rarely changes their predetermined views anyway, because those views have been reinforced by decades of strategic agreement from hundreds of other men. Meanwhile, lies get rewarded with positive responses, continued access, and sometimes intimate benefits. Men learn that their job isn't to help her understand reality. Their job is to validate whatever reality she's already constructed, regardless of how detached from actual cause and effect it might be. This creates what psychologists call intermittent reinforcement, the most powerful form of behavioral conditioning ever discovered. Sometimes truth gets punished severely, sometimes it gets ignored, but lies consistently get rewarded. The lesson becomes crystal clear. Honesty is high risk with minimal reward, while strategic agreement is low risk with consistent payoff. Women's response patterns make this disaster inevitable. They've already decided what they want. To hear before they ask the question, any disagreement gets interpreted as a personal attack on their judgment, their character, or their worth. Emotional meltdowns and relationship destruction become more likely when someone tells truth than when someone provides strategic validation. The rational male response becomes, say whatever I have to say to survive this interaction, because trying to actually help her understand reality is relationship suicide. Each interaction reinforces the pattern until the system becomes permanently locked in deception mode. Years of this reinforcement build models of reality based entirely on decades of lies from hundreds of different men. She develops beliefs about relationships, men, and human nature that are completely detached from how these dynamics actually operate in the real world. If you're starting to understand how this systematic deception creates the relationship disasters you've witnessed in beautiful women, make sure to subscribe to this channel and hit that notification bell. The psychological dynamics I'm revealing today took me years to decode, and there's much more depth to explore in upcoming videos about attraction, power, and the hidden forces that shape human behavior. Women who aren't exceptionally beautiful receive fundamentally different quality feedback from men, which allows them to develop more accurate understanding of relationships and human nature. While they still encounter strategic communication, they also get enough honest input to calibrate their understanding of reality. Men interacting with average-looking women have less motivation to lie because the potential rewards for deception are lower. They're more willing to disagree, more likely to provide honest feedback, more inclined to treat her as a complete person rather than just a potential sexual opportunity they need to manipulate. This doesn't mean average women always get truth. Men still have incentives to be strategic, but they get occasional reality checks mixed in with the strategic communication, which gives them opportunities to learn that beautiful women never receive. Average women still get upset when they receive honest feedback they don't want to hear, but they receive it more often because men have less motivation to absorb the emotional consequences of their displeasure. The cost-benefit analysis is different when the visual payoff isn't extraordinary. The result is that average women develop less warped models of how relationships actually work. They haven't been lied to as consistently or as comprehensively as their more attractive counterparts. They experience natural consequences for poor behavior more quickly because men have less motivation to tolerate dysfunction when the compensation isn't overwhelming. Beautiful women, by contrast, can maintain catastrophically poor relationship patterns for years because men will endure enormous amounts of chaos, entitlement, and unrealistic expectations in exchange for access to extraordinary beauty. This delayed feedback prevents them from learning from their mistakes until the damage becomes irreversible. Here's where the tragedy reaches its climax. All of this deception ultimately produces the exact opposite of what beautiful women actually want. They end up becoming architects of their own romantic disasters by making decisions based on completely false information about how relationships work. The outcome is predictable and devastating. Beauty alone cannot compensate for crazy behavior indefinitely. Men might tolerate significant dysfunction temporarily while hoping that access to beauty will be worth the cost, but they won't tolerate it permanently. Eventually, even the most stunning woman discovers that looks can't compensate indefinitely for personality disorders, unrealistic expectations, or emotional instability. She experiences what I call turning victory into defeat. Having unlimited romantic options but consistently achieving poor results because her strategy for using those options is based on lies rather than reality. She has every advantage but fails anyway because she's been systematically misinformed about how to leverage those advantages effectively. Distorted models of reality inevitably lead to disastrous outcomes. When your understanding of cause and effect is completely wrong, your attempts to create desired results will systematically fail, often producing the exact opposite of what you're trying to achieve. The cycle perpetuates because each failed relationship reinforces the pattern rather than correcting it. Instead of questioning her approach, she receives more strategic lies explaining why the lies didn't work. Instead of developing accurate understanding, she gets validation for her false beliefs and encouragement to try the same failing strategies with different men. She becomes trapped in what economists call a negative feedback loop, where failure reinforces the very behaviors that created the failure in the first place. Each disaster confirms her distorted worldview rather than challenging it because everyone around her has incentives to protect her from reality rather than help her understand it. The only consistent source of truth in a beautiful woman's life typically comes from strong male role models in her family. Fathers and brothers who love her enough to prioritize her long-term welfare over their short-term comfort and who have no sexual agenda that benefits from lying to her. These men can tell her the truth because they can handle her emotional explosions without losing anything they need from her. They can absorb her anger, withstand her displeasure, and persist through her resistance because their relationship doesn't depend on maintaining her approval for access or benefits. Strong family men also have the ability to create consequences for poor behavior in ways that romantic interests cannot or will not. They can withdraw support, apply pressure, and create accountability because they have leverage that isn't dependent on her sexual approval. This ability to back up truth with consequences is crucial because consequences are what transform information into behavioral change. Family members represent her best opportunity for staying connected to reality, the only chance to remain grounded in a world that's systematically trying to disconnect her from cause and effect. Their love-based motivation means they care more about her long-term well-being than her immediate emotional comfort. But even this family advantage often fails because some beautiful women become so accustomed to manipulation and validation that they reject even loving accountability from people who genuinely want to help them. They've learned to use emotional manipulation, guilt, and withdrawal of affection to train even family members to avoid giving difficult feedback. When loving accountability gets rejected, she descends deeper into what I call fantasy land thinking, a completely unrealistic understanding of relationships that becomes more detached from reality with each passing year. The tragedy of wasted opportunity occurs when her best chance for truth gets destroyed because she's become so addicted to validation that she can't tolerate honesty even from people who love her unconditionally. The very people who could save her from the deception become casualties of her need to maintain delusions rather than confront reality. Beautiful women acquire enormous power over men's emotions and behavior without earning that power through experience, wisdom, or character development. This creates what I call a power-wisdom disaster, where influence vastly exceeds understanding, leading to predictably catastrophic decisions about how to use that influence. Most forms of power come with built-in learning processes that develop judgment alongside authority. Business leaders gain wisdom through years of successes and failures. Political leaders learn through smaller positions before acquiring major influence. Even celebrities usually develop some understanding of their impact through gradual exposure to fame. Beautiful women often acquire massive power overnight during adolescence without any corresponding development of the wisdom necessary to use that power effectively. They're handed influence over men's decisions, emotions, and behavior without understanding relationships, male psychology, or the long-term consequences of their actions. This power-wisdom disaster creates maximum influence with minimum understanding. They can dramatically affect men's behavior, but don't comprehend why their actions produce the results they do. They can inspire intense devotion, but don't know how to maintain it. They can attract unlimited attention, but don't know how to convert it into sustainable partnership. The gap widens over time because power itself prevents the learning experiences that would develop. Wisdom. When you can get what you want through manipulation rather than understanding, you never develop the competencies necessary for sustainable success. Eventually, the disaster becomes unsustainable. Power without wisdom leads to self-destructive decisions that ultimately undermine both the power and the relationships it could have created. The lies that beautiful women receive operate on what psychologists call a behavioral conditioning system, a pattern of rewards and punishments that shapes behavior more powerfully than any conscious decision-making process. In this case, lies are consistently rewarded while truth is consistently punished, creating a psychological environment where deception becomes not just expected, but demanded. This conditioning system creates reality distortion, where the world becomes increasingly warped over time. Each lie she rewards teaches men that lying works better than honesty. Each truth she punishes teaches them that honesty is relationship suicide. The feedback loop becomes self-reinforcing until truth becomes extinct in her information ecosystem. Meanwhile, she develops what economists call a self-fulfilling prophecy about male behavior. She expects men to tell her what she wants to hear, rather than what she needs to know. So she creates conditions that ensure receiving strategic validation rather than honest feedback. Her expectations guarantee that she'll get lies rather than truth. The rational male adaptation to this system is learning what produces results versus what represents reality. Men discover that success with beautiful women has nothing to do with honesty and everything to do with strategic communication designed to manage her emotions rather than inform her understanding. This creates a tragedy for everyone involved. Beautiful women lose access to the information they need to make good decisions. Men compromise their integrity to gain access to beauty. Relationships become built on strategic deception rather than authentic connection. Everyone loses, but the system persists because the incentive structure makes it nearly impossible to change. What I'm describing isn't a unique flaw in beautiful women. It's a predictable pattern that emerges whenever someone acquires unearned power in a system where others have strong incentives to avoid challenging that power. This is a structural problem, not an individual failing. Men don't usually complain that beautiful women are stupid in areas where their beauty doesn't affect feedback quality. They excel academically, professionally, and technically because those environments provide honest information about performance. The dysfunction emerges specifically in areas where their attractiveness influences how people respond to them. This represents a specific type of dysfunction that correlates with attractiveness rather than general intelligence deficits. It's a predictable flaw that emerges from environmental conditions rather than genetic limitations. The pattern has a companion issue in male psychology: successful men becoming insufferable for similar reasons. When people acquire power without corresponding accountability, they tend to develop distorted understanding of their impact on others. Power corrupts not because power is inherently evil, but because power insulates people from the consequences of their actions. Understanding this as a broader pattern helps us recognize that beautiful women are victims of a system that systematically lies to them rather than villains who choose to remain ignorant. They're responding rationally to the information they receive. It's just that the information they receive is systematically false. The most important thing to understand about this phenomenon is that beautiful women deserve sympathy rather than blame. They're victims of a system that lies to them from the moment they become attractive until the day they die. They're operating with false information about reality, not because they're stupid, but because everyone around them has powerful incentives to keep them misinformed. The men who lie to them aren't evil either. They're responding logically to an incentive structure that punishes honesty and rewards strategic validation. They're making rational decisions within a system that makes truth economically and socially dangerous. This creates a tragedy for everyone involved. Beautiful women lose access to the information they need to build successful relationships. Men compromise their integrity and authenticity to gain access to beauty. Society loses the benefits that could come from honest communication between men and women. The rare exceptions, strong family men who break this cycle, represent the only hope for preventing beautiful women from becoming completely disconnected from reality. But even these exceptions often fail because the system is so powerful and the reinforcement so consistent that even loving accountability gets rejected in favor of comfortable lies. This is fundamentally a structural issue about how society handles beauty and power, rather than a personal failing of beautiful women or dishonest men. The problem lies in the arrangement of incentives, not in the character of individuals operating within that arrangement. Understanding this dynamic is the first step toward changing it. When we recognize that beautiful women are victims of systematic deception rather than authors of their own confusion, we can approach the problem differently. Beautiful women who want to avoid this pattern have to do something difficult but powerful: actively seek truth, even when it feels uncomfortable. That means creating space for honest feedback, especially when it challenges existing beliefs, and developing real curiosity about how relationships actually work, not just surrounding themselves with validation. Men who genuinely care about attractive women also carry responsibility. It takes courage to be honest when silence is easier, to prioritize long-term well-being over short-term access, and to stop enabling unhealthy patterns simply because doing so feels safer or more rewarding in the moment. On a broader level, society needs to acknowledge that beauty creates a unique environment. That environment brings advantages, but it also brings blind spots. Truth-telling must be valued more than polite agreement, and character development must be treated as seriously as appearance if long-term fulfillment is the goal. The solution isn't denying that beauty offers benefits, and it isn't trying to remove those advantages. The solution is making sure those advantages don't block the development of other essential skills, like emotional awareness, accountability, and healthy communication. Beauty should add to relationships, not replace the abilities that make relationships actually last. When we understand how systems quietly shape behavior, we stop blaming individuals and start making better choices within reality. Seeing the structure clearly gives people the freedom to act differently. The real tragedy isn't attractiveness itself. It's how a culture designed to extract value from beauty often undermines the growth needed to turn attraction into trust, stability, and real partnership. Truth can feel risky in the short term, but avoiding it always creates bigger problems later. The women who learn this early and choose growth over comfort are the ones who manage to preserve both their confidence and their happiness. If this analysis helped you recognize patterns you've experienced personally or observed in others, like this video and subscribe to the channel for more insights into attraction, psychology, and human behavior. Turn on notifications so you don't miss future videos, and share this with someone who needs to understand that this conversation isn't about blame. It's about awareness, responsibility, and better choices for everyone.